Good morning. Welcome to June and new topic. Just trying to continue staying on some informative kind of awareness themes. And June is PTSD Awareness Month. And one of the tasks, one of the goals this month is just to talk about how either prevalent or normal it is for people to have that based on just everyday life. I mean, often, certainly like lots of things in psychology, but PTSD specifically discovered during through military affairs, going back to World War One and understanding it, studying it, and everything else. But really, it is a very far-reaching, prevalent kind of struggle, diagnosis, intrusion. Kind of a chronic issue and pretty fierce. Might be one of the most fierce mental health diagnoses people can have. But a goal this month is to talk about how prevalent that can be and how to encounter it if you ever find yourself in a situation that meets some of these initial criteria. Not everybody gets PTSD instantly after a really difficult event. That's kind of the goal, is to help prevent it from happening. But far too often there's some factors that lead people into that struggle. So this month of being aware of what goes on, importantly with PTSD, supports are essential to help people get through that, because it is something that people deal with kind of quietly or internally, and it makes life really hard. And that's one of those tenets around here, is we don't want life to be hard or people to be isolated. And PTSD has a significant chance to isolate people and do that. So some highlights from the email that went out on Monday. Very conveniently, ESPN article that comes out and talks about an alpine skier who is the most winningest downhill skier, but she had a very significant downhill accident, I think in late fall, where she fell and a ski or one of the slalom poles punctured her body and injured her internally. And it created a significant event, and recovering from that physically was challenging, but mentally was challenging as well. So I caught it, and it was good timing, and I thought I'd share that. And that was the anchor of Monday's theme, just to talk about a couple of things. Anytime someone faces an incident that where they feel like there's life or death for them or somebody they care about, is kind of that marker where a flag gets planted and says that's potentially where something very acute or becomes traumatic starts. When a worldview really has a chance to change, particularly when there's a lack of help afterwards. We know that silence, isolation, withdrawal are three of those enemies of mental health. And many times after a big event, people don't know how difficult it was for somebody. So when they don't have that support or they're not talking about it, again, increases the chances that PTSD could eventually come. A lack of help. If someone's like, this is internal, why is this bothering me? This doesn't bother anybody else. It was just this, right? Just somebody I love died suddenly. That happens to lots of people. This shouldn't be affecting me this way. So there's lots of internal dialogue that makes it bad. And then also this idea of when you experience lots of difficult events in a row, it increases the chances of something fierce like PTSD happening. And in that article, I thought was another good layer of it, is she had really something we'd all consider awful, an accident that jeopardizes her physical health. But she cited in it, if you read through that, that her dad died a few months earlier, that there were a couple other stressors that happened, and then that happened. So if you think about a cup being full of resiliency and coping, a bunch of stuff just kind of drained that cup and made her very, very vulnerable. And then she wasn't talking about it. She wasn't getting the help she needed. And it took her several months to kind of figure stuff out. And even now, as she starts competing again, she's still talking to a counselor, still working through it. So it illustrates the last point I'm making, is that PTSD is this kind of carried along with you, not necessarily a chronic permanent diagnosis, but something that just does not go away very easily. So have a chance to read through that, because I wanted to get to some questions to dialogue about it, just from that awareness standpoint, and see maybe what the group kind of knows about it. Is if you knew anybody that has PTSD, its kind of cousin diagnosis is called acute stress. It's kind of the early stage of it. If you know anybody that had it, do you know the reason why they got it? Just to kind of illustrate how broad it can come from. So that's the first question this morning. Do you know anybody who has or had PTSD, and why did they have it? Anybody know?
I have a friend who was served in Afghanistan, and it took, I think, almost 2 years before he could drive over a manhole without
Hmm.
like sheer panic, because those were like the primary IEDs.
Sure.
when we were, and they don't have any form of water infrastructure, right? So they were just, the insurgents were getting manhole covers, making them explosives, and they would put them in the road, and we would all drive over and not think anything of it,
Yeah.
and then the vehicle would detonate. Well,
Mm.
come back over here, you couldn't drive anywhere without just like
Sure.
whole body screaming and
Sure.
slam on the brakes and that whole thing.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that is that kind of understanding or maybe most popular version of military experience that people carry with them. And that is, I think anybody understands that one, and it makes a lot of sense. To answer my own question, like usual, um, uh, some examples can be someone has a car accident, right, and they can't drive through that intersection anymore. Because when they do, they start to get, physical symptoms of anxiety or something else. That's an example. Somebody can't go in a particular room in their house or in their parents' place where something really terrible happened. Whether you think about that of a death of a parent or some abuse that happened, things like that, where it's associated with a location, it starts to create things. So well, obviously, military experience is the most popular, most intense version of that, but it can happen in everyday life about a particular area, place. It could go as far as, say, someone got some food poisoning. It led to something really severe. They had a really long night, and they're not going back to that place or having that meal again. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have full like clinical diagnosis of PTSD, but certainly they would talk to you about the symptoms they have when they think about that night or they think about that meal or something else. So, just referencing that's how broad it can be. But be thinking about one of those informative exercises was to try and ask around what the symptoms are if you know someone is struggling through it. There's a picture shared that has a bunch of words that describe the symptoms that people deal with, and just to see maybe one of those we all relate to, but PTSD is kind of like all of these. So it's not just one occasionally; it's all of this at once. So that's the goal, is just to really describe what it's like. So maybe your radar is up and you notice a few things differently. So you're prepared in case something does happen to you. You know how to get help right away or do something so it doesn't lead to that. But also, if you do come across and someone's bold and transparent and says, I have this, you have some more knowledge about how to assist them and help. Because if you hear anything from me today, it's more prevalent, more people are struggling with it than you realize. And many things you can do for them will help. And that's kind of the final points here to make, is recognizing first that PTSD robs people of the way they want to experience life. Because even if they stay away from that car accident, maybe they end up watching a movie series and that same scene is played out online and they become overwhelmed by just thinking about their own experience. Or they happen to not be in control of something, and when they feel that, it kind of opens the door to them feeling like I did before when I wasn't in control. So, as much as you can think, well, if they just avoid that area, it'll be okay. It's always on their back type thing. And it can make them always be playing chess, so to speak, with their day to day activities. Like, I need to go here and then avoid this and do that. And they're thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead all the time. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. Second, in the worst part, one of the most fierce part of PTSD is it robs people of the ability to determine what's real or what's not when they're struggling with a PTSD attack. We'll call it that. It's a very relevant thing. People may not know they're going through a PTSD attack. You might. Suddenly someone is staring off into the distance, or they become very quiet all of a sudden, or they're having difficulty moving or looking. Might be an opportunity for you to help, come alongside and say something, but that could be an example where they're really struggling with a moment that mentally, physically, emotionally, they are just frozen and stuck and don't know what to do. And that's the last one, just to recognize that PTSD is one of those really challenging ones because it affects every part of the kind of who the person is. I mean, physically, the symptoms are fierce. People will struggle with nausea. They'll struggle with uncontrollable kind of shakes when it comes. Mentally, thoughts are coming, usually critical, overwhelming. They don't feel safe, which leads into that emotional duress that happens. PTSD usually comes out of a life and death experience, right? So they have some spiritual, existential questions that they can't answer about why did this happen to me, or what does this mean about the world, or who can I trust? A lot of those things that go in, that's where it's fierce, is not one part of who the human being is kind of preserved from it. So, um, yeah, this week, just trying to lay the groundwork about how we can be cognizant of that for your own protection, I would say, if something comes in. But as you learn more aspects of PTSD, I hope that it helps empower you when you notice a few things. Um, I wish it was easy to say what the statistic was. I'm sure we can look that up as we go through the month. I'll come across it. But just in your own world, my guess would be there's at least 10% of people around you that have some form of really acute stress from an incident that just happened to them, or they have PTSD that is coming from something. Just looking at chronic abuse, whether physical, emotional, sexual abuse, statistics alone have a high chance to create PTSD in people's lives. But again, lots of bad things happen to people as they go forward. Those car accidents, health issues, death, loss of somebody. Um, dare I even say sometimes, I mean, trauma is a word that it's hard to, I'd say, define and keep narrow. But that's why I started with anything that is a life and death, paradigm changing event in someone's life creates that initial kind of flag that says something's different in my life from now on. And when that happens, or you hear it happens in someone else's life, the last thing I'd say this morning is really check in on them and double check, come alongside, just see how they're doing, and then put something in your calendar at 90 days, 120 days, 180 days, and just check in on them every quarter as they go forward, because likely you might be a key support for them just as they're trying to sort it out. They don't understand this. Maybe they've never been through something so comprehensive and difficult. So, PTSD Awareness Month, big overview. If you haven't read that article, it's a really good one. Track it down. It's just a nice little snippet of what it can be like and how suddenly it can affect someone, even at the top of their game. And you think, how can an athlete who's won the most go through that? But just an injury she's probably had before, of falling on a slalom, suddenly becomes nightmare, and then she can't get herself back up very easily. And that's a good illustration, a good preview of what is like for the rest of us sometimes when an event happens we couldn't have imagined. It's kind of unreal, and then it leads into something else. So, be good to talk the rest of the month about it. Good to see everybody. Have a good workout today.